Now, I'm very happy that we have Harold Meyerson here with us. I hadn't known that Harold was into public banking until I heard him speak in Philadelphia. So a shout out to the Philadelphia folks here.
Public banking.
Harold Meyerson is well known here in D.C. for his weekly op-ed columns in the Washington Post, providing a breath of fresh air as he writes from a left perspective for the paper. He's also editor-at-large of the American Prospect, founded by Robert Reich and others, and is one of the magazine's chief political writers. His articles on politics, labor, the economy, foreign policy, American culture have appeared in The New Yorker, The Atlantic, The New Republic, The Nation, The New Statesman. In his hometown of L.A., he was columnist at large for the L.A. Weekly, the nation's largest metropolitan weekly paper, winning numerous awards. He's been a frequent guest on television and radio talk shows, including hosting the weekly NPR show Real Politics. All in all, he's been something of a Los Angeles institution. We hope you're a D.C. institution as well. He's an avowed democratic socialist and says he's one of only two that he encounters during daily rounds through the nation's capital. The other, of course, being Senator Bernie Sanders. He's vice chair of the National Political Committee of the Democratic Socialists of America. Finally, I should mention that he was the keynote speaker I mentioned that already, in Philadelphia. He currently shares his time between Washington, D.C. and Los Angeles. We're delighted he can be with us here in D.C. this evening. Please join us in welcoming Harold Meyerson.
Thank you, Ruth. Yes, this is the second time I've been at a conference or a panel on public banking, despite the fact that I actually know very little about it. The Philadelphia invitation completely took me off guard. But one reason I go to these things is I learn a great deal, as I have from tonight's panel. So consider me one of you. There were so many things here tonight that I knew nothing about that now I do. But I am going to presume on Ruth's hospitality and that of some of you who may have read a column of mine to begin with a story dealing with sort of the larger banking system in the United States, since I know something about that, though nowhere on the level that Nomi does. And put yourself back in time to probably the bleakest economic winter the United States has ever faced, 1932-33. Franklin Roosevelt has been elected president, but he has not yet taken office. Presidents were inaugurated in those days in March, not January. And he is putting together his cabinet. And we learn from the diaries of Raymond Moley, who was his chief brain truster, particularly on economic policy during that time, what was going through Roosevelt's head as he was trying to figure out who his Treasury Secretary should be. And Moley was telling him that Roosevelt knew that there were a lot of people arguing for the Virginia Senator Carter Glass, who later authored the eponymous, is the word, Glass-Steagall Act, which separated investment banking from the kind of banking you and I mainly do. But that there was a hitch here, which is that Glass wanted an official from J.P. Morgan to be his deputy secretary. So Roosevelt thought about this. He thought this over. And then he gave a really interesting answer, which I'm not going to give you now, just to hold your attention and be a tease. I'm going to give it at the end of the talk. So in the largest sense, the United States and Great Britain have gone down the path of having the financial sector, the banks that Nomi talked about, and other financial institutions, hedge funds and private equity in this country, really dominate the whole of the economy, very much in contrast, for I think the reasons we heard tonight, to the German economy. And this financial domination, the growth of which Nomi has described, is evident in so many ways. Let me give you one example. I was in this discussion about a week ago with some of the, I think, really most creative union leaders in the country, some of the best labor economists, a few other folks, some labor law experts, former NLRB members, on what the hell to do about the decline of worker power, the decline of unions in this country. And I pointed out at one point that when the National Labor Relations Act was passed in 1935, giving workers the right to collective bargaining, there was at least one sector of the American economy that really was pushing for this, and other Roosevelt reforms like Social Security. That was mass market retail, which wanted customers to have more money in their pockets. So Filene's, as in Filene's Basement, Macy's, headed by Jesse Strauss, they had all been really lobbying for years and helping work out plans to do this kind of distributional shift in income, which required giving workers more power and so on. And the depressing thought I brought to that gathering, and I always like to share my depressing thoughts widely, so I'll bring it here as well, was that I cannot identify a sector of American business today that would support really significantly giving American workers more power. That's not the business model of American business anymore. Workers are costs, and even if the individual CEO wants to do this, there is the mantra of shareholder value. There is a return of investment that is far more important than the welfare of your community, than the welfare of your workers, than the welfare of the United States. And I think at the top of the reasons why this is the dominance of the so-called investment community, or more broadly, more simply, Wall Street, putting pressure on these companies to do nothing lately. I mean, it's become the reductio ad absurdum. Lately, we have the so-called activist shareholder. What a euphemism. The activist shareholder, that's who CEOs are bargaining with, not their own workers. They're saying, okay, let me keep my own job, and I will, downsize here, offshore there. This has been going on for some time. It's just that, as I said, activist shareholders have reduced this function to a kind of absurd and very visible level. Its visibility is the only thing about it that is remotely positive. But if we look at the German example that we've had explained to us, I think that helps explain one of the fundamental differences between our economy and the German one. Of all the anomalies that you look at, there is this. As you pointed out, Germany has 1/4 the population of the United States, yet it has, a larger volume of exports. And it is the largest exporting country that has the largest trade balance on the planet. And we, of course, are the largest importing country on the planet with the largest trade deficit. Now, there are all kinds of reasons for that. In the case of German exceptionalism, not all of them great. I mean, part of this is the way in which the role that Germany has taken in the larger European economy is as the really kind of taking a model that other European countries can't particularly follow, and also exploiting the advantage given the economy by the euro, which is valued less than the Deutschmark would be if the euro did not exist. But there's another reason, too, related to the kind of public banking institutions that we heard about this evening. And that is that they do fund these small and medium-sized enterprises, and they fund something called the Mittelstand, which are the small manufacturers of Germany, which are the real backbone of the German economy. And this is a local thing. The local savings bank knows the local manufacturers. These businesses did not get offshore. They did not go out of business like half of the state of Ohio and half of the state of Michigan and half of the state of Indiana and Pennsylvania did once corporations, manufacturing corporations in this country were told that they really needed to cut their costs and have the stuff made in China. Let's talk about today, again, financial domination and China. One of the more fascinating stories of the last 2 days has been the visit of Chinese President Xi to Britain, in which, Britain now has its own open door policy, the ostensible name of the U.S. policy towards China 110 years ago. Britain has now, in that they want China to come in and invest in all kinds of enterprises, including helping them build a nuclear plant. This has tended to make most of Britain's allies, including the United States, nervous for reasons both good and bad. The valid reason is China is not necessarily a friend of democracy. Let's just state that at the outset. But this is driven in part by the fact that China has decided that London, the city as it's called, their version of Wall Street, will be their entree to global currency markets, that they can do their business there. And the city in Britain carries, if anything, as much, if not more, political weight than Wall Street has here in Washington.
Absolutely.
We had this version of this, by the way, when the entire financial community was at the core of the effort to pass permanent normal trade relations with China back in 2001, which greatly accelerated the offshoring of the kind of businesses that survived and thrive in Germany, the offshoring of all those suppliers and manufacturers, and some manufacturing itself, to China because it was cheaper. So that's some of the downside of financial domination, and I could go through this at greater length, but won't. The second point, unrelated to the first point, and I don't have a transition here. The place where this kind of reform needs to go on in the American political ecology is cities. That's not because it wouldn't be great if we could do it at a state level like North Dakota. It's because progressive forces, for a variety of reasons, don't have many states in which progressives run the government. At the moment, there are actually only 7 of the 50 states that have Democratic governors and Democratic control of both houses of the legislature. And that's not to say all those Democrats would be too crazy about this either. But it's a pretty grim landscape. And those of the 7 states, all of them are quite small, except California, which is in many ways not just my home state, but really carving quite a distinct political profile. The place to do this is cities. I think it's fair to say that cities have never had as distinct a political profile in American political life as they do today. Of the 30 largest American cities, 25 of them have Democratic mayors. Again, not all of them exactly champions for this kind of thing. It's hard to imagine, let us say, Mayor Rahm Emanuel of Chicago getting behind this sort of thing. But that said, 25 out of 30 is the greatest partisan imbalance since God only knows when. I actually had some interns, bless them, at the American Prospect try to find, an earlier time when this sort of thing could be found, and they couldn't, and that wasn't their fault. I became sort of aware of this when I realized that when Bill de Blasio was elected mayor of New York, a city where this issue is particularly tricky, given that in New York, the Wall Street economy is a big chunk of the municipal economy as it is not elsewhere, but that he was one of only a number of members of sort of the class of 13 of people elected with really new urban political coalitions that have come together in many cities for two kinds of reasons. First, cities are where the demographic change in the United States has been greatest, and cities are the place where the possibility of these groups developing some autonomous institutions and coming together in progressive coalitions has proved most possible. So you see coalitions for immigrant rights, the successor groups to ACORN in the African American communities, enviro groups, general progressive groups, other organizations really have formed, I think, novel progressive coalitions that have brought all kinds of people open to reforms, hopefully like this, to power across the map, in the Bay Area, obviously, but also in Seattle, in Minneapolis, in places you would not expect, in Phoenix. I mean, if you ever want to check a disparity between city and state. Look at the position on immigrant rights in Phoenix versus Arizona. You're in two different worlds. I think that is the arena that we need to focus on, and I'm really glad that you had a good meeting today, and I hope it goes well, and if the Post news pages don't cover it, I will get around to columnizing on it at some point. Okay, back to Raymond Moley and Franklin Roosevelt. If you'll remember, when we left them, Moley said, well, the problem with Carter Glass, he really wants this guy, Russell Leffingwell, who's a number 2 at J.P. Morgan, to be his number 2. Now, J.P. Morgan was sort of famously headquartered at the time at 23 Wall Street. So Roosevelt thought it over, silent for a minute, and then he said, no, we can't have anyone from 23. That's not a bad position, I think, for progressives to take, particularly as we contemplate the possibility of another Democratic presidential administration. One column I will be writing probably next week, not tomorrow, but that's done. But for next week, I mean, we know that Bernie Sanders is a form of left pressure on Hillary Clinton. Not just Bernie Sanders. This is the base of the Democratic Party, which clearly has moved left. The center of the Democratic Party has moved left. It's not just that the left is more visible. The percentage of people in the Democratic Party who self-identify as liberal has grown remarkably in the last several years. Among young people, there is, according to some polling, as much support for socialism as there is for capitalism. I will tell you, as one of these self-avowed socialists, that if we were asked to define socialism, it would be tricky nonetheless, given, notwithstanding this lack of clarity. There is the experience, particularly of young people, with the actual existing American economy of the last 7 years in particular, but even way back before then, has been pretty grotesque. And so we're seeing this as a basis of support. So I think of the many issues in which not just Bernie Sanders, but the rest of us should be pressing any incoming Democratic political figures. And I think a winner of an issue, because the fear and loathing of the big banks transcends the left. It is a feature across the American political spectrum, which is not to say it's really getting very far given who's in power in different places. But I think that sentiment is clearly there. It would behoove us. I haven't used the word behoove in a talk in God knows how long. It would behoove us to take this nobody from 23 and expand it to what we want in the people running the financial policy of the United States in the next administration. I don't think we need another generation of folks from Goldman Sachs. And I used to know their street address, so I could say nobody from, I've forgotten the number now. But anyway, I don't think we need anybody from, yes. So my point is this. I think this should be something that becomes an actual demand of American progressivism at this moment. No more Wall Street guys, and they have been guys by and large, running our financial policy, whether Republicans or Democrats are in the White House. Yes, there are exceptions. There's NOMI. There's a couple of private equity firms I know that basically only deal with unionized firms and don't discharge people, just try to turn around for the workers' benefits as well as the owners' benefits. There are the rare banker like Ron Bloom, who left Wall Street and worked for the steelworkers for years, trying to save the pensions of the hundreds of thousands of steelworkers who were getting completely screwed as the industry went into collapse. Yes, there are some. This is a line of you would save Sodom if there were 3 just men, or whatever. However that works. But I see no reason why this shouldn't be a demand that we go forward with. And look, ever since Occupy Wall Street, one of the most revealing things I think in American politics of the last several years is the fact that Occupy Wall Street actually polled pretty well. a bunch of disproportionately scruffy people in an urban park. That tends not to poll very well. They had these episodes with the police. Generally speaking, that doesn't necessarily poll very well either. But the basic message of Occupy Wall Street managed to command majority support in the polls throughout their most of their time on the stage. That sentiment is still there, and we need it both to help us get to things like public banking, and more significantly than that, since public banking is ultimately just a means to an end, we need it to help build the kind of more just economy and livable society in which we all hope to live. Thank you.
Thank you to all the panelists.